I'm having a great time with the combat in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, but I know from the comments in some of my videos that a lot of people are really struggling with the combat, and this is going to feel a lot different than most RPG games that you guys have played in the past. The combat in this game, there's a lot of depth to it. It can be relatively complex, but here is the thing, if you have knowledge of it, I don't really think the combat system is that hard, and by the end of this video, I think you guys are going to be master swordsmen, so let's hop right in, and we're going to talk about everything I can with the combat in this game, and I'm going to take you guys from someone who knows nothing to some stuff that's going to help people and people who are at the end game to function a little bit better in the fights. Now, probably the first thing you're taught in this game is perfect blocking and riposting, and I think this is the biggest trap that a lot of players fall into. And if you played Chivalry 2, you played Mordhau, you played a slasher game, this is pretty normal, right? Someone attacks you, you want to hit them right back. But here's the thing that the game doesn't really explain to you. When you're first starting out, your character is very weak, and it makes it seem like riposting is this special move that's super hard to pull off. It's not very difficult to time the perfect parry, and it's not very difficult to riposte, but you're going to find if you're doing this initially, you're not going to see a lot of success in the combat. So you're going to find as you play that the most important thing is your stamina and how you manage that stamina. And if you're just going back and forth riposting with someone, you're going to run out of stamina extremely quick. And in this game, your character starts very weak. So you're going to be at the losing end of most of those engagements. And it can be a good way to level up, but it's definitely not the best way to fight of just block riposte, block riposte until someone drops. Now, especially as you get higher levels, riposte can be a part of your game, but I want you guys initially to back off a little bit of riposte, and let's talk about how we can generate a little bit of offense without burning all of our stamina. So those perfect blocks where the icon pops up and you time your defense, that's the way you should be blocking pretty much the entirety of the game. There's no reason to just hold down the block button. It's relatively easy to time that. And here's the thing with the perfect blocks or the perfect parries is that they don't actually use any stamina at all, so you can use this as much as you want. Now, instead of immediately coming back in a riposte, a lot of times you're better off using a technique called the feint. So how you feint is relatively easy. You hold down your attack button, and then before you release it, you quickly switch it to a different attack direction. This greatly increases your chances of landing a strike on your enemy. And feinting is a maneuver that it'll work well at level 1, and it's going to work well at level 30 also. It's a really, really strong technique. And I mentioned holding down your attack button when you're feinting, but let's talk about holding down our attack button for a second when we're not going to feint. If I just plan on throwing the attack that I'm holding for, this is actually called a charged attack, and you'll notice your character lift up their arms when they're going to perform this attack, and this is what you would call like a heavy attack in another game, as opposed to just a quick press of your attack button, which would be a light attack. The charged attack is going to do more damage, so the game doesn't really explain this to you, but there are two forms of attacks. So we talked about charged attacks, we talked about feinted attacks, but where do you actually want to attack your enemies? And the simple answer is not in the direction that they're holding their weapon. They'll have an increased chance of blocking your attack if you attack right at the side that they're holding the weapon. So just think initially when you start out, if someone's holding their weapon to the left side, you have a upper attack, a down below a stab attack, or you have the opposite side attack to attack them from. And in your early game, this is going to be really your way to land strikes or land attacks. And now this technique of attacking where your opponent's not holding your blade will be again effective up until the end of the game, but there is going to be one little change to how we do that. But before we do that, let's talk about the biggest power spike your character can have, and that's by going to a trainer called Tomcat and learning the Master Strike. Now, especially in the early game, this is the most powerful move in the game, and it takes a little practice, but it's actually relatively easy to pull off, and on the original map of the game, most of the enemies will let you do this pretty much all day to them. So a Master Strike, it's like a counter in a game like Chivalry. So to do a Master Strike, rather than hit your block button, you attack back at the enemy's attack, but you do it with an opposite directional of where they're attacking from. So if they're going to go with an overhead attack, you hold your weapon down below for a stab. When that parry icon goes off, instead of blocking, you attack, and you're going to get stuck in an animation that is 100% free hit on your enemy. The thing with the Master Strikes, though, is that they can only be performed with sword type weapons, and especially in the early game, these can kind of carry your fights as the enemies are relatively low armored, so you can kill them in 1 or 2 Master Strikes extremely quick, and the animations are kind of cool. I think you guys are going to enjoy them. Now, as you do progress towards the later ends of the game, Master Striking enemies will be a little bit more difficult as the higher level swordsmen, they're not just gonna sit there and do nothing and let you Master Strike them all day, right? They will feint attacks just like you're doing and switch up their directions, so you have to switch with them extremely quickly if you want to Master Strike them. They're not just gonna give you freebie after freebie. And remember I mentioned riposte wars earlier in the video, how you don't really want to do them. And again, in the late game, you don't really want to get stuck in those riposte wars also because higher level swordsmen are going to actually Master Strike you back, and they're going to actually Master Strike during those riposte wars, and there's nothing you can really do about it if they choose to do it. So that's why you don't want to riposte too much also, even at the later levels. And speaking of Master Strikes at later levels, I talked earlier about how you want to attack from the direction that your opponent is not blocking, but this changes very slightly when your opponent is a higher level enemy that is also using a sword, but you still have different areas that you can attack them that they're going to be open for. So there's always going to be openings. So let me use an example. Your enemies, they can Master Strike too. So if your enemy is holding their blade up over their head, you don't want to throw a stab at a Master Swordsman because they're going to hit you with a Master Strike. But you do have 2 directions that they are not blocking, and that is both of your horizontals. And there is one more really good way of defending yourself that I haven't talked about, and I watch videos on TikTok or YouTube I don't see a lot of people using. I feel like it's because they never really explained it to you in the game of how to do it, and that is dodging. And dodging can be a little bit brokenly overpowered. So here's how you dodge. Very simple. When that icon comes up for you to parry, rather than hitting your block button, you just hold the directional key and hit your jump key, and you're going to dodge out of the way. And especially against lower level opponents, this is almost always going to be a free hit. Some of the higher ones will react and be able to block your attacks, but you still kind of get the initiative or get your turn to attack. And this is going to lead us into our next technique that we're going to talk about, which are combinations. But I do want to pause the video here for 1 second just to say, if you made it this far and you can perform perfect blocks, you can perform feints, you can perform Master Strikes, and you can kind of take your time and think your way through the combat, you don't need to know anything else to beat this game and win high level fights. But there is a technique that I think, especially at the higher end, is going to be really effective for you guys and you're really going to like, and that's the combo, which in the beginning of the game, they're going to feel a little bit trash when you're low level, but as you get to the end game, combinations can be extremely strong. And there are 2 types of combinations in the game. There are natural combinations, which you can just kind of make up yourself, right? You just chain attacks together to make a combo. But the game also has set combinations, which have to be done in a certain order, and these will often have a certain benefit to them, something like a pommel strike, which will turn into a blunt damage attack on a sword and can often one-shot even higher enemy in the game. And there are a bunch of others that include leg strikes to hit different parts of armor, stabs to the head, but these are pretty nice if you get a few of them kind of in your rhythm and in your repertoire. These are really good for a few reasons, and one of the biggest ones is that they really press the enemy's stamina and can put them behind on stamina where they can't really attack you back. And in the later game, once Henry gets strong, you can often, if you're fighting a weak opponent, just combination through their riposte and stuff because you hit so fast that they're not going to hit you before your combo lands. So now, when do you use combinations? Because I see a lot of people complain that they can't land them or the computer just blocks everything and it just seems like a waste of time. But you gotta be a little tactical and kind of mix it in your gameplay here. So after so many hours of playing, I generally have an idea of when I'm going to hit, but a great way to use your combinations is when you're throwing a high percentage strike, like you're feinting into an opening, so you think you probably have a good chance of hitting the enemy here. you can use that first shot as the lead to the combination and then continue flowing it from there. That's a great way to use it. Also, when you dodge, I find when you hit a successful dodge, that initial strike you throw is pretty much most of the time going to be a guaranteed hit. So you can start your combination with that first strike and then chain it into the second and third. I like using the same concept off my master strikes. So if you hit a master strike, you can often follow it up with an attack that can start off your combination. But I just want to point out here, your initial master strike does not count as one of the combination attacks. So once your master strike lands, you immediately attack, and that attack that comes after the master strike, that's what's going to start your combination. And now I have to touch on the cheesiest way to fight in this game, but if you add it into your gameplay, I think it's pretty cool to throw in here and there, but you can use this technique to just cheese almost every fight in the game, but it's not going to be fun to do it, and that is by using clinching. Clinching is so easy to do. You just run straight at your enemy with your sword out, and you're going to get engaged in a clinch, and if you leveled up your strength a little bit, you're going to win most of these clinches automatically to land free strikes, and if you take this perk called Wrestler in the strength tree, you're going to wind up winning almost every clinch that you ever come in, and it's just like super easy mode. And I've seen people who are just running up and clinching people 5 or 6 times in a row to get free wins. Not a fun way to play, but I think it's kind of cool if you can integrate it into your combat where you're landing some of the more complex mechanics, and then you maybe throw a clinch in there to finish it off. I think it's kind of cool and looks pretty sick, but I don't really endorse cheesing the game too much, but play how you want to play. All right, and as we start wrapping up here, I think this will give you guys a really good idea of how the combat works and what techniques you should be using and when you should be using them. But of course, the big element here is combining these techniques together. And I think a great way to start is by mixing things like the perfect parry and the feints and the charge attacks in at first, attacking from the proper directions, adding master strikes, and then building on combinations and other aspects of the game. I think it's a progression as you play. You try to, use other elements of the combat system, and I think there's no reason that everyone who plays this game can't master the combat, as once you understand it, I don't think it's that hard. All right, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you want to watch another video that's going to give you guys some tips on how to fight mobs of enemies, right, when you're fighting 4 or 5 enemies, it's going to pop up somewhere. I'm just going with both sides because I don't know what side, but it's going to pop up right now. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. Champ out.